So whenever you're planting trees, an old adage that people used to say is you want to plant it 3 times as wide, 3 times as deep. Only part of that's correct. You want to dig it 3 times as wide. If you dig it 3 times as deep, we're running into the problem I was just talking about. Trees' roots grow 2 to 3 times as wide as their drip line. A drip line is exactly what it sounds like. It's the edge of the canopy wherever it rains. Drip, 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 drip. That's what that's going to be. So for whenever I'm digging a new tree, I try to get myself about where I think is going to be at least 2 to 3 times the size it's going to be. Before I even do anything, I go ahead and cut myself a nice little circle. Now, the other thing that I do is, like I was telling you about the roots, I like to know how deep of a hole I actually need to dig because I'm very lazy. So, also, sometimes this soil isn't necessarily the best soil. It's also not going to be what the tree is going to be growing in. So trees are really good at finding their nutrients once they're established. You don't usually need to fertilize them unless it's really bad growing conditions. But taking the time to bust this up will allow it to spread out really well. Sorry, brain fart. You can kind of tell, this is not a great example, I don't want to beat him up too bad.
Do you see that thing at the bottom you were talking about?
I'm trying to expose it. So, I can't tell it exactly, but you can kind of feel it and see what I'm talking about. So, so you can kind of see how it's like straight trunk, and then down here it kind of starts to develop into a bit more of a fibrous root. It's a little swollen right here at the base. I still think that this one was just planted way too deep, and that this is actually where the root flare is supposed to be, but because it was planted so deep, all of its roots are coming out of the sides. As I was showing them, I think the root flare for this is supposed to be down here, because this is a pole pretty much all the way down to here. And I think because this was like sitting more or less kind of on the bottom of the pot, it wasn't able to do its job. You can kind of see there, it's just like a pole and then it stops. So I think this one was just way too deep, which does happen a lot of the time. It's pole and then it stops. Like I was saying, 2 to 3 times as wide, not quite as deep. Want to be able to see how deep of a hole we actually need to dig. If we were to have dug that just based on the pot, I mean, it's not nothing crazy, but it is saving us a little bit of time, energy, and sweat. Nice. What's that?
Right there.
Was that where the hole was?
Yeah.
Right here? Okay, thank you, sorry. It's been a long day.
So when you say 2 to 3 times, is that what you think it's going to be in the future or what it is right now?
So we're digging that for what it can be in the future, because we want those those roots to grow really wide. And most trees they want to grow wider than they do deep. The black gum that we have up there is a bit different. It has a crazy deep taproot. So that's why I like using it for a street tree. It's not going to buckle your sidewalk or your concrete or anything like that. But it also means you can't transplant it. Once you put it somewhere, it's got to stay there. And the reason we want to dig it a bit wider than we normally want to, and the reason we want to knock the soil off of it, is because the trees are going to find the nutrients that they need. And if you were to just put compost in here, which is what people will do a lot of the time, thinking they're amending the soil, is you've made really great nutrient-rich, water-holding soil that the tree is not going to be super motivated to leave. So all your roots are going to stay right there close to the tree, and it's never going to be able to develop really strong buttress roots. It's going to snap when it gets a really heavy windstorm or it gets too overly saturated, and it's not going to find the nutrients that it needs to be able to find. So this hole, I know it doesn't seem very deep, is about pretty much where it needs to be at. I mean, it's maybe 3-4 inches underneath the ground. How many people set up a Christmas tree before in their home? Familiar with the concept? We don't want the ugly side of the Christmas tree poking out. Same thing we want with any of our trees or plants we put in the garden. You want to find the best looking side. This one, as you can see, is kind of a pole with a little bit of growth at the top, so it doesn't really have a best looking side, but it does have this nice little fruit right here. It's got a little bit of growth right here. Most of its sun's going to be that way, so I'm deciding that this is the best looking side. So I'll try to flare these out just a little bit, just so that they can kind of immediately start running horizontally. And then I just come back with the soil that was already here, which y'all have really, really, really good dirt over here.
Yeah, I can smell it. You got in there digging out, like, it smells earthy.
Awesome. Can be. Alright, so we weren't able to identify the root flare, so we can't have a super exposed root flare, but that's about the best that we're going to be able to do for now. If we had one, I meant to try to grab one, I can't always find them. There's a really great, portable watering devices are one of the best things in modern technology, which it's not really anything crazy. A lot of times just a bag that you fill with water and then it drains out. But why that's important is it slowly allows water to infiltrate the soil. A lot of the times whenever you hit stuff with a hose, most of that water is leaching away and the plant's not absorbing it. For plants like this, there's something called a tree diaper, which is just like kind of a round bag that you set around the base of it. It's filled with silica, and it absorbs water from whenever it rains or you hit it with a hose and then slowly distributes it into the ground. For really small trees like this, it's perfect. A lot of people like them because they're not very obstructive to the eye. You can cover them with mulch. My only issue is you can kind of forget that they're there, which I'm not 100% sure how biodegradable they are, but that tree doesn't need it forever, and another one probably does, so I'm going to reuse it. I prefer to use tree bags. Tree Gator is kind of a big brand that you'll hear. It's literally like a 10 to 20 gallon bag that gets wrapped around the tree. It's got a hole in it that you fill it up with a hose, and then over 6 to 8 hours it drains out all of that water. I think that is the best way to be able to water a tree, especially those 3 gallons that we have over there. For a tree that size, you can get away with watering it once a week, especially during the winter months like this, all the way up until it gets hot. I'd water it once a week and then just keep an eye on it during the summer. If you wanted to fill it once a week for the first year, you'd be fine. Especially if you're going to do like I was talking, where you go through, cut all the roots off besides the actual real roots. Definitely drench it all the time. Trees take up way more water than people think that they do. Especially the larger the tree, the more water cost. So they say that for every inch of caliper is a year of dedicated watering that you're going to have to do. So that's why a lot of people don't plant 6-inch trees, is they don't want to be responsible for watering it for 6 years. It's also why a lot of 6-inch trees that get planted usually don't look super good. So if you ever have somebody that comes to your property that's going to be doing work for you, like, make sure that they're on the watering or you're on top of the watering, because a lot of the times, damn. While we're over here, I know it's getting dark. Something that I always tell everyone, if you're going to have a tree diaper or you're going to have a tree gator, you're going to put your tree diaper down first, you're going to put your tree gator down first, and then you're going to want to use some mulch. I prefer this stuff right here, which is just brown shredded hardwood mulch. A lot of the times people like to use the chips. I get that the chips look aesthetic and all of that, but if you've ever been down to Colonial Lake in the past year, particularly when we get a really big rain, it all washes away. It doesn't have a lot of water retention, it is just kind of straight up bark, so it just floats off. This has been broken down and shredded down into fibers. Some of the fibers are finer than others, and what happens as rain accumulates over time is those fibers kind of start to compress together almost like plywood, and it makes a really, really solid mat. Mulch is one of the most important things you can do for your tree to give yourself peace of mind. It's going to prevent weeds, it's going to prevent weed whackers and lawn mowers, it's going to retain your water in the soil, it's going to allow appropriate air exchange, it's going to contribute to organic matter over time. It's just one of the best things that you could possibly do, and it looks really nice. But you want to keep in mind, there's a 3-3-3 rule is what people go by. As you can see, I didn't do a super dedicated, precise mulch line right here, but the concept is you want to be 3 inches away, 3 inches deep, 3 feet wide. That's a really good principle to start with, and you can scale it up the bigger the tree that you want. I understand that a lot of people don't have space to be able to mulch everything around, but if you get a small tree like this and you plant it, and then you plant at the same time for what you anticipate it to look like in the future, the roots from the tree and the roots from the plants are all going to grow and adapt together, versus if you wait 5 years and the tree's established this really nice root system, and then you come back in and plant a bunch of stuff around it, it's going to be a little frustrated with you. I always recommend to people that if you're going to buy a tree, it is much better to start small and be patient and allow it to grow. The city of Charleston plants 15-gallon trees for their street trees. They do not do ball and burlap. They do container only. Personally, I could be wrong. This is going to go on the internet, roast me alive for it. I don't know how long ball and burlap is still going to be like a super prevalent thing that you see used within the next few decades. It's really